Everybody hears this song as a victory lap, and that's exactly the problem. Because a victory lap is what you take after the race is over, and this artist never once acts like the race is over. That's the whole thing hiding in plain sight here. You put this on, you hear the designer names stacking up like a grocery list. You hear the cars, the jewelry, the casual cruelty toward exes and side chicks, and your brain files it under Flex Record. Done, next song. But listen again to how often the certainty cracks. Listen to how many times a boast gets followed almost immediately by a question or a threat or a flinch. That's not swagger holding steady. That's swagger being rebuilt in real time, line by line, because it keeps slipping. Start with the obvious layer, because you have earned the deeper one. On the surface, this is a Flex anthem. Full stop. The opening run is basically a checklist of who's dressed better than everybody else in the room. A specific cardigan brand, a specific floral set, the phrase dead fresh, doing double duty as both a compliment to the outfit and a little joke about looking so good it's almost morbid, so good it's killer. That phrase alone is worth sitting with for a second, because most people skate past this slang. But dead, attached to fresh, is the first hit of theme that runs the entire length of the track. The constant collision between looking alive, thriving, glowing, and an undertone of something final, something dangerous, something that could end. Fresh as in new clothes, dead as in stopped. The artist doesn't mean it that way consciously, probably, but the language keeps doing that. Keep that filed away, because it comes back. Then you get the money talk, and on first pass it's just numbers. Everybody's got M's, meaning millions, and immediately after that there's an irritated dismissal of somebody asking to be paid over a mobile payment app. That's presented as a punchline, a little get out my ear, brush off. But notice the structure. The boast about money is immediately followed by somebody else trying to access that money, and the artist shutting it down hard. That's not incidental. That's the emotional shape of the entire song. Wealth arrives, and immediately there's a perimeter that has to be defended. The money isn't just enjoyed, it's guarded. And guarding something is a different emotional posture than enjoying it. You don't guard things you're relaxed about. Now here's where the song starts revealing itself if you're paying attention to who benefits from the money. It's not the artist alone spending on themselves first. The very next image is the nanny getting dressed in designer. Then the grandmother pushing a luxury car. Think about the order of operations there. Not the girlfriend first. Not a new chain first. The caretaker and the grandmother, the two people historically associated with unpaid, invisible domestic labor, are the first beneficiaries named on record. That's a value statement dressed up as a flex. This is somebody who watched people work themselves down to nothing and is now able to reverse that specific harm, visibly, publicly, using the exact language of luxury the culture already understands as success. It's generational, repair, wearing the costume of materialism. And right after that tender, almost devotional gesture, dressing up the women who raise him, the song asks its most vulnerable question outright. If everything disappeared tomorrow, would you still be here? That question doesn't fit the Flex Record mold at all. Nobody who is fully secure needs to ask that. That single line undercuts every ounce of bravado surrounding it. And it does so by shifting from third-person bragging about objects to second-person, direct address, present tensed out. That a tense shift worth flagging specifically, because up until that point everything has been declarative. I did this, I have this, I am this. Then suddenly it's a conditional, a hypothetical, aimed at another person, asking them to prove loyalty under a condition that hasn't happened yet, which means the artist is already rehearsing the loss, already grieving something that hasn't been taken from him yet. That's not confidence. That's hypervigilance, wearing confidence as a disguise. This is a psychological pattern worth naming plainly. It's the anxiety of sudden wealth, specifically the fear that everyone around you is only there for money, layered directly on top of real, sincere love for family members who were there before any of it. Two totally different relationships to the people in his orbit, sitting one line apart. Grandmother, unconditional, rewarded without a test. Girlfriend or partner, conditional, love contingent on a hypothetical stress test that hasn't even happened. That's not hypocrisy so much as it's the honest shape of what happens to people who go from nothing to everything fast. Family becomes a fixed point. Romantic or newer relationships become suspect by default, guilty until proven loyal. Then the hook returns and rides right past all that vulnerability like it never happened, back into the outfit inventory. The cash talk, the dismissal of the person asking for money, that's the structure of the whole song in miniature. Vulnerability surfaces, gets acknowledged for exactly one breath, then gets buried under another wave of stuff. Watch for that rhythm because it repeats every single time the hook comes back. It's not filler. It's armor reapplied on schedule. Now the second verse is where the self-mythology really opens up, and this is where a lot of listeners either laugh at the audacity or get turned off by it. So it's worth actually examining instead of reacting to. There's a blunt disclaimer early on, something like clarifying he isn't easily used or played, immediately followed by a claim that he will, in fact, take charge of a woman, bossing her up, elevating her. On the surface, that reads as classic possessive bravado. But notice what's actually being offered. Not romance, not affection as its own reward, but status upgrade as the currency of the relationship. He likes seeing her post pictures wearing things he purchased. That's not a passing detail. That's the whole transaction spelled out. The relationship is explicitly mediated through commerce and through public display of that commerce. Love in this verse is legible only when it's visible, branded, and paid for by him. That's not necessarily cynical. Some of it reads like genuine pride and generosity, but it reveals that his entire vocabulary for intimacy has been rebuilt around ownership and provision. He can't say I care about you without first establishing I bought you something and you showed people. Right after that comes a run about shows around the globe, offers piling up, being invited to sit front row at fashion events while still bringing his own coffee cup. A small, almost throwaway detail that's actually one of the most human lines in the entire song. Everyone around him has changed. The rooms have changed. The size of the check has changed. But he's still the guy holding his own coffee, slightly out of place in a room designed to make people feel like royalty. That detail does something none of the jewelry can do. It makes the wealth feel earned and recent rather than inherited and comfortable. It's a tell. People born into that room don't narrate the coffee cup. People who fought their way into that room can't stop noticing it. Then there's a line about wanting the good outweigh the, essentially trying to make his accomplishments outweigh his flaws, hoping his heart doesn't give out under pressure of it all. That's the clearest window the whole track offers into what's actually driving him. This isn't a guy performing invincibility because he feels invincible. This is a guy performing invincibility as a coping mechanism against a very real, very physical fear that the stress of trying to outrun his past will literally kill him before he gets to enjoy having escaped it. Go back to that early phrase, dead fresh. It's not a coincidence that mortality keeps needling its way into a song about material success. The nicer things get, the more explicitly death shows up in the margins. That's the double meaning running underneath the entire hook. Dead fresh isn't just slang for looking incredible. It's an accidental confession that looking this good, having this much, came at a cost that feels mortal. Immediately following that vulnerable admission, the song snaps right back into petty cruelty, a line about looking better with his attention on someone than her own partner does, calling that partner an eyesore. This is worth sitting with because it's the sharpest example in the whole song of overcorrection. He just admitted, in the previous breath, that he's scared his heart won't hold up under the weight of trying to be enough. And the very next reflex is to tear somebody else down to feel bigger. That's not a contradiction the song is trying to hide. That's the actual mechanism of insecurity on display in real time. Vulnerability shows up, and it's immediately converted into an attack on someone else's worth, because attacking outward is easier than sitting with fear inward. If you've ever known somebody who gets meanest right after they've been the most honest, this is that pattern set to a beat. Then we get the origin story, and this is where the song does its most audacious reframing move. He states plainly that he came from nothing, that he was living in a hotel room with his sisters and his mother, and then, without missing a beat, claims to be the first black man to do this where he's from, explicitly comparing himself to Obama. Take a second on that comparison, because it's doing more work than it looks like. He's not comparing himself to Obama as a policy figure or a public servant. He's invoking Obama purely as a symbol of a specific, historic first, the idea of breaking a ceiling nobody in his environment had broken before. That's a claim about representation, not really about music at all. He's saying a success functions, locally, the way a historic political milestone functions nationally. Whether or not you think that comparison holds up, the impulse behind it is completely genuine. This is someone trying to give his wealth a meaning bigger than personal enrichment, trying to make it stand for something a whole community can point to. The luxury isn't just for him. It's evidence, presented to everyone who came from where he came from, that the hotel room doesn't have to be the ending, that reframes everything that comes after it, including the motorcade image, the traffic stopping when he comes through town. On paper, it's another flex, but layered under the Obama line. It starts to read like someone consciously performing the visual grammar of importance because he understands, better than most, how rarely people from his background get to be visually important in public space. The point isn't the traffic. The point is being seen as significant enough to disrupt traffic in a body and from a background that the world was not built to treat as significant. Then there's a sharp little turn toward pettiness again, knocking a rival's biggest opponent out of position, openly admitting to enjoying the smallness of it. This is the same pattern from before, repeating at a different scale. Big historic claim, followed by small localized cruelty, because both of them are actually serving the identical function. Proof of dominance, proof that nobody gets to disrespect him and walk away clean. The scale changes, national symbolism one line, petty beef the next, but the underlying need doesn't change at all. He needs to know, constantly, in every size of interaction, that he's not losing anymore. By the time the third verse rolls in, the song shifts its material references toward the classic and the old school. A specific vintage car being name-checked, a description of the car's interior as soft and rich as a French dessert. And right in the middle of that plush, comfortable image, there's a sudden legal confession, raising his hand and lying under oath in court about his brother. That line detonates quietly. Everything before it in that verse is texture and comfort. Then suddenly we're in a courtroom, and the stakes go from designer fabric to perjury, from taste of loyalty under legal pressure. And what's the loyalty for? Family. Again, the same theme that showed up with the grandmother and the nanny returns here in its darkest form. Not generosity this time, but obstruction, protection at the cost of his own legal exposure. He would lie to a judge to protect his brother. That's the other side of the same coin as buying his grandmother a car. Family loyalty isn't just decoration in this song, it's structural. It shows up in the gentlest gesture and in the most legally reckless one, and both times it presented completely matter-of-factly, like there was never a decision to make. Right after the courtroom confession comes one of the most quietly devastating lines in the entire song. He says he got rich, but he still wakes up every day looking for the next come-up. Read that again slowly, because it's a thesis statement disguised as a throwaway bar. He is not describing ambition here. Ambition implies you're chasing something you don't yet have. He already has it. He's rich, and he's still doing the exact same threat scanning, opportunity hunting mental routine as before he had anything. That's not hunger anymore. That's a nervous system that never got the memo that the danger passed. This is somebody whose body is still living in the hotel room, even while his bank account has fully left it. That's the realest psychological detail in the whole song, and it's delivered with almost no emphasis, buried between a jacket price tag and a tequila brand, like it's just another flex instead of the confession it actually is. Then the song pivots into a section about cutting off a woman who tried to leave for someone with less to offer, framed with visible contempt, followed immediately by dressing another woman up in expensive gear. Same pattern as before. Provision as intimacy, punishment for perceived downgrade, reward for staying inside the hierarchy he's built. Then there's a boast about investing money on the streets and watching it multiply, followed directly by a line about spending $1 million on lawyer fees and not caring about legal trouble. Put those two next to each other and you get the real economic worldview of the song. Money moves in two directions simultaneously: growth and risk management, investment and insulation from consequence. He's not just accumulating. He's building a legal and financial buffer around a life he knows carries real danger, the kind of danger that requires lawyers on retainer. That's not the spending pattern of somebody who feels safe. That's the spending pattern of somebody preparing constantly for the moment it all goes wrong, which loops all the way back to the loyalty question from the very first verse. If I lose it all, will you hold it down? He's not asking that rhetorically. He's asking it because he has personally budgeted for possibility. Now here's a counterpoint worth raising honestly, because a fair read of the song has to hold it, not dodge it. Somebody could reasonably argue that reading this much psychological weight into what is functionally a party record with ad-libs and outfit references is overreaching, that sometimes a flex is just a flex, and the artist is simply doing what the genre has always done, turning success into a scoreboard because that's the language the culture speaks and rewards. That's a fair pushback, and it's worth taking seriously instead of steamrolling past it, except the density of the details cuts against that reading. If this were only a scoreboard, you wouldn't need the loyalty question. You wouldn't need the line about the heart possibly giving out. You wouldn't need the confession about lying under oath, delivered with zero triumph, sitting flat in the middle of a verse otherwise built entirely on triumph. A pure flex song doesn't accidentally let mortality and legal risk and abandonment fear leak through the cracks that many times once might be an accident of phrasing. This many instances, spaced evenly across every verse, is a pattern, and patterns in lyrics, even ones written fast, even ones written mostly for the pocket beat, tend to reveal what's actually sitting underneath the writer without them consciously deciding to put there. The genre gives him the vocabulary of luxury. What he does with that vocabulary, using it to talk about caretaking, about fear, about legal jeopardy, about historic firsts, is the actual content layered under the borrowed shell of flex record. And this isn't unique to this one song, either, which is exactly why it's worth widening the lens. This is one of the most consistent undercurrents in hip-hop as a genre broadly. Going back decades, the Sudden Money narrative almost never stays purely celebratory for long, because Sudden Money doesn't erase the nervous system that formed under scarcity. It just gives that nervous system better props to hold while it keeps doing the same old job. You hear it in artists across eras describing counting money at night because they can't sleep. You hear it in the ones who buy their mother's houses in the same verse, where they admit they don't trust anyone else in the room. The formula recurs because the underlying human experience recurs. Rapid class mobility inside one lifetime creates a specific kind of dissonance where your environment says you made it and your instincts refuse to believe it. And the songs that come out of that dissonance almost always end up doing exactly what this one does, stacking triumphant imagery on top of unresolved fear, because that's literally what the internal experience feels like moment to moment for the person living it. Which brings the song structure back into focus one more time, because the hook itself, repeated 3 separate times without meaningful variation, functions less like a chorus and more like a mantra somebody recites to keep themselves steady. The outfit, the money, the dismissal of anyone questioning that money, the loyalty test question, all cycling back around every few minutes like a loop he can't quite exit. Most choruses exist to give the listener a place to land. This one exists to give the artist a place to return to, a fixed script of certainty he can retreat into every time a verse gets too honest for comfort. Notice that the loyalty question always shows up inside the hook, never resolved, never answered, just asked again and again in exactly the same words, verse after verse. A song that had actually settled that fear would only need to ask it once. Asking it identically, 3 separate times, is the sound of a question that has never once gotten a satisfying answer. So bring it back to the opening claim, because everything above is really just evidence for one idea. This was never simply a victory lap. It was a man trying to convince himself the race really is over, using every luxury signifier available as proof, while his own word choices, dead fresh, the sudden loyalty question, the heart giving out, the constant looking for the next come up even after getting rich, keep quietly admitting that it isn't over, that it may never fully feel over no matter how many cardigans or cars or Fashion Week invitations pile up as evidence otherwise. That's the sharpest way to say it. This is a song about buying enough proof of safety to outrun a fear that money was never actually built to solve. And that's exactly why it resonates past the surface flex. Because underneath the brand names is a completely universal, completely human contradiction. The gap between what you've achieved and whether you can ever fully let yourself believe you're allowed to keep it. Dead fresh, looking more alive than you've ever looked, and still, somewhere in the back of your mind, waiting for the other shoe, fresh as hell on the outside, still bracing for dead on the inside. That's the song. That's what it's actually been saying the whole time.